Imagine living in a country where a single phone call can strip away your constitutional rights before you've even had a chance to defend yourself. No court hearing, no warrant, no due process, just the sound of a knock at your door, followed by the words, "We have to take your guns." This isn't a scene from some dystopian movie. It's what's happening right now in the state of New York. And it's all thanks to a law that's being called one of the most dangerous assaults on the Second Amendment in modern American history. In a recent expose, Jared from Guns and Gadgets, one of the most respected voices in the gun rights community, broke down exactly what this law does, how it was passed, and why it should terrify not only New Yorkers, but gun owners across the entire country. Because once one state sets the precedent for mandatory gun confiscation, others will follow. Let's break down what's actually happening. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, alongside the state legislature, quietly signed a piece of legislation that now requires police officers to seize firearms whenever they respond to domestic or family violence calls. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't about discretion. This isn't about probable cause. This is a mandatory seizure, meaning if a call comes in and an officer arrives on scene, guns must be taken. It doesn't matter whether the accusation turns out to be false or whether no one was in immediate danger. The law is written so that once that threshold is met, your weapons go with them. For many, this might sound like common sense safety, but Jared, who spent years responding to these very types of domestic calls, warns that not every call is legitimate. In his own experience, while most domestic incidents do involve real victims who need help, there's a darker side, a side where the system is abused. False accusations, vindictive partners, neighbors with grudges, or even misunderstandings can lead to devastating consequences. And under this new rule, that's all it might take for a law-abiding citizen to lose their firearms. No hearing, no charges, just a knock on the door and a new label. Risk. The new law also expands what counts as a weapon. It's not just handguns or rifles anymore. It includes shotguns, antique firearms, stun guns, even imitation or disguised weapons. Essentially, if it looks like a gun, it's on the list. And while the previous law required guns to be returned within roughly 48 hours once the situation was cleared, that period has now been extended to a minimum of 5 days, with no clear limit on how long authorities can actually keep your property. Let's pause right there. A minimum of 5 days, not a maximum. Meaning that once your guns are taken, there's no guarantee when or if you'll ever see them again. Jared points out something crucial here. This isn't just about gun control, it's about government control. Under the Constitution, specifically the Fourth Amendment, citizens have the right to be secure in their persons, homes, and property against unreasonable searches and seizures. That's one of the core protections separating a free nation from tyranny. And yet, this law casually bypasses it, all in the name of safety. The irony, Jared says, is painful. The politicians who claim to protect the vulnerable are in fact undermining the rights that protect everyone, especially those who depend on their firearms for self-defense. The single mother, the elderly couple in a high-crime area, the family that simply believes in their right to be safe. Now let's dig deeper into what this means for due process. When police seize firearms before a hearing, it flips the justice system on its head. Traditionally, an individual is presumed innocent until proven guilty. But under this model, you're effectively punished first and heard later. Jared highlights that this is exactly what the 14th Amendment guards against: deprivation of property and liberty without due process of law. The founders wrote those words for a reason. They knew that unchecked government power would always creep toward abuse. Supporters of the new law argue that it's about preventing domestic homicides, that removing guns in moments of crisis saves lives. But even their own statistics show the narrative isn't that simple. Between 2018 and 2022, most domestic violence homicides in New York involved knives, blunt objects, or physical assault, not firearms. In fact, guns accounted for only about a third of such cases. Yet the response isn't to address the underlying violence or the failure of the justice system to protect victims. The response is to disarm everyone. This raises a haunting question. When the government decides who can and can't be armed, who's left to defend the innocent? The power of discretion gone. One of the most dangerous elements of this new law is how it removes discretion from law enforcement. In traditional policing, officers often have judgment calls to make, discretion to issue a warning instead of a ticket, or to calm down a situation without making an arrest. But this law takes that power away. Now, even if an officer believes no one is in danger, even if they know the accusation is false, they must seize the firearms anyway. Jared emphasizes that this level of blind compliance pushes the nation closer to authoritarian policing, something the Founding Fathers feared deeply. In his words, this isn't policing, it's enforcing orders. It's what separates free nations from regimes where citizens obey because they have no other choice. Imagine you're a gun owner in New York. You live with your spouse and adult children. A neighbor calls 911 after hearing an argument. Police show up. They're required by law to take any firearms in the home. Even if you weren't the one involved, even if you were in another room, even if it's all cleared up 10 minutes later. Your guns are gone. And the process to get them back isn't simple. It means lawyers, paperwork, time, and money. It means explaining yourself to a system that already assumes your guilt. Wider impact. What comes next? Now, here's where the story gets truly alarming. What starts in one state rarely stays there. New York's law could easily become the template for similar measures across the country. Jared warns that states like California, Illinois, New Jersey, and others are already watching closely. Because once one governor successfully enforces confiscation under the banner of safety, the dominoes begin to fall. And it doesn't stop there. Laws like this open the door to endless reinterpretation. What if, tomorrow, domestic call expands to include verbal disputes or mental health checks? What if someone calls the police because they're worried about your social media posts? What if fear itself becomes enough to trigger gun confiscation? Jared reminds viewers that fear is not a constitutional right. The government cannot guarantee safety, but every citizen has the right to protect themselves. That's what the Second Amendment is about. It's not about hunting. It's not about sport. It's about sovereignty. The right of free men and women to stand as the final defense against danger when government cannot or will not. To put it bluntly, this law flips that principle upside down. It assumes that your right to self-defense is a privilege, not a birthright. And history has shown, time and again, that once rights are framed as privileges, they vanish. The false promise of temporary seizure. Proponents claim the new rule is only temporary, that guns will be returned once the situation is resolved. But Jared makes a compelling counterpoint. Once the state takes something from you, the burden is always on you to get it back. You'll be fighting through court systems, facing bureaucratic delays, and paying legal fees that could cost thousands. And if the law doesn't specify a clear time frame, what's to stop temporary from becoming indefinite? That's the real danger. It's not the letter of the law. It's the precedent it sets. If the government can take your firearms temporarily for your safety, what's next? Your speech? Your privacy? Your ability to defend your home? Conclusion: the larger battle. The Second Amendment isn't just a line in a document. It's the line that separates freedom from submission. Jared's message throughout this coverage is simple. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and never stop questioning authority. He reminds viewers that free people don't ask for permission to be free. The Constitution was designed to protect individuals from government overreach, not the other way around. And every time a new safety law chips away at those protections, it brings the country one step closer to losing them for good. This isn't just a New York issue, it's an American issue. Because if this becomes normalized, if the people shrug and say, well, that's just how it is now, then the fight is already lost. So, here's the question that every American needs to ask. How much of your freedom are you willing to trade for the illusion of safety? Do laws like this really protect the innocent? Or do they quietly punish the law-abiding? Because once the government has the power to take your rights before you've even had your day in court, what's left of the Constitution at all? If you care about staying informed, if you believe in understanding what's happening beyond the headlines, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and share this video. The more people who know about laws like this, the harder it becomes for them to pass unnoticed. Stay alert, stay aware, and most of all, stay free.